I missed it.
Okay, so maybe, yeah, we can have some of these topics addressed in our next community gatherings. We can even give the floor to, yeah, to other people to give some ideas on how, on topics that we can cover and so forth, so we can get more diversity on the topics that we normally address it.
Yeah.
But yeah, maybe we can just get started. And again, this is a conversation. So anytime that you want to address anything in particular, and we can go to a different direction. This is just, let's say, a framing, but we can always, you know, go deeper into some specific topics that you'd like, without just following what is here, right? This is just a way to guide us, but not constraining at all. Yeah. So welcome to another community gathering. This time we're talking about systemic leaderships, leadership, and in addressing complex challenges, complex issues. Before we covered a lot of topics, complex issues, what that is. Then we talked about collaboration. We talked about narratives. What else did we talk about? We talked about a lot of things. And those topics were a lot more, let's say, not necessarily that, but it's a lot more external to us, right? It's what is happening out there in the world, and what can we as a collective do differently. And I think this has a different tone to it because it turns the frame to us in a lot of ways. And what can we do as individuals or as humans to understand ourselves and be part of this overall narrative that we're trying to create here about systems change. So I'd like to start with, we have a little agenda here before we jump into it. I'm very excited about this session. So just some topics that we're going to cover. So what this systemic leadership is, why is it important for us to be talking about that? And then I can open to conversation, examples that you might think about, that you've experienced, and how is this topic relevant in the work that you do or field of interest and so forth. So let's get started with a song, shall we? Why not? And I'm not going to sing, everyone. I cannot destroy your day. So just read this statement for you. This is Michael Jackson's song, Men in the Mirror. And hopefully, you know that one. It's a classic and I love it. So I'm just going to quote here. I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. And no message could have been any clearer. If you want to make the world a better place, take a look at yourself and then make a change. Ugh, goosebumps, right? At least. So before we get into it and understanding that we're talking about systemic leadership and so forth, systems change, any thoughts on this paragraph or these words here? Does it relate to you in any way? Do you feel anything from that? Any thoughts?
Yeah, I'll go. So for me, I feel like the world as I see it is coming from who I am. So it's actually what I see is a reflection of the woman in the mirror, basically. Yeah. So when it comes to even personal life or professional, whatever interactions I have, I think this just speaks to the fact that whatever I'm seeing, it has got much to do with me. And if I don't like what I'm seeing, then there is need for me to make that change.
Nice. The topic of, let's say, perspectives, or that circularity of who I am influences the way that I see the world and creates a reinforced feedback loop and then so forth, right? So what I see in the mirror is what is in some ways the reality that I feel that I experience and vice versa. Very powerful stuff, Linda, to kick us off. Thank you. Any other?
Yeah, I'll go also. When you shared the screen, I was kind of reflecting because so we are living in a world, and that world, we are living in systems and a world or wherever space we live. Everything that happen in a place that we live, it's a result of how us as human beings act. And we create whatever that exists around us. And often we have this tendency of blaming, the world is going this way. But then we don't know that whatever that happened is the action, is a result of human actions. So when I saw this quote, I was very excited because I was like, everything must start from you as a person, you know? The mirror, it's you looking at yourself. And this is something that need to happen. So if it's like it starts from an individual point of view, so like you as a person with yourself, and then it expands to the broader community or everybody. So what I'm trying to say is, imagine if every single person, one of us, like have to get to the place where you have to do that self-reflection, right? You sit with yourself and self-reflect, whatever decision that you make, that's gonna be you, and it's gonna influence the actions that you take. Sorry about that. It's gonna influence the action that you take. And as you take those actions now, it's gonna create the world that we see out there. So I was thinking about it from a space of everything starts from within. So when you work within, then you create the world without. So that was my reflection. And the world without is now what shapes the community. It's like the collective intelligence, if I can put it like that, or whatever that exists, or the ecosystem around us. It starts from the individual and then it expands. Yeah.
Nice. So is this, motion of we have some type of a say, not everything, right? But in some ways we have a say in how we behave in the world. We cannot, I think it's the idea that we have some type of how can I say, some things we can't really change, and some things we can't really take accountability on changing, but our behaviors in some ways we can be accountable for. And our neighbors might be doing something completely different, but it's about looking at ourselves and identifying whether our actions are according to principles that we would like to live with, or for, and all that kind of foundational reasons why we're doing what we're doing, right? Reflecting on ourselves. So thank you, Arsene. Very good. Braden. Yes.
I like thinking about this a lot. This is something that I think about very constantly because I guess for me it's a matter of control. And I feel like when you're faced with problems and when, they're collective problems, the easiest thing for anyone to do is point a finger at somebody else and make it their problem and absolving themselves of any type of responsibility for it. And like ultimately it's, the amalgamation of everyone's behavior that's manifesting the current situation. And it should bring some solace and some comfort and inspiration to know that, like, you know, the only thing that you can actually change and have power over is yourself and your actions and what you do. Anything else is not really up to you. It's up to, you know, people and their bodies and the circumstances or whatever. But when you demonstrate how you want other people to act by acting that way yourself and inviting other people to partake in those activities with you, you can serve as an inspiration to show that it is possible to do those things and be those things, when a lot of people feel this apathy towards, like, oh, well, that's just not the way of things, that's not what people do. But if people are doing it, then there's no excuse, you know, you're able to do it. And yeah.
Very nice. I think the role model idea, right? Sometimes we think that we are, you know, let's say we read something and that's very powerful. There's a very powerful idea. But at the end of the day, we really we really in some ways copy other people's behaviors without even noticing, right? If our families, our parents are eating a lot of vegetables, then we're a lot more inclined to eat vegetables and enjoy it, compared to growing up in a household that doesn't happen. So behaviors, actions have a lot of power over how we are in the world. And I think what you're saying is, what are my behaviors that I'm putting across, and how that's going to resonate with people as well. So we influence a lot of people by just being and just doing whatever. So that goes in different directions, but yeah, our behaviors are extremely important. Very good point, Braden. Thank you. Yeah, God, there's a lot of content here. A lot of, as we say, there's a lot of cloth for us to play with. That's a saying in Portuguese that sometimes I say. But anyway, going back to our slides. Welcome to Fru. We're just talking about this. Where is it? Where's my screen? It's here. We're talking about Michael Jackson's song and some reflections, first reflections after going through some of these lyrics and thinking about how that resonates with us. And yeah, that song really makes me think a lot, and how we can be better versions of ourselves, I guess. So in the topic of systemic leadership, I think you talked a lot about, let's say, modeling and behaviors and being that reflects on our environment and vice versa. And that comes with some skills, right? Of course, that can be inherent in some people, but of course, this is not just born with. There are several skills and capacities that are, let's say, required for us to be that role model, support, to have a presence in a space where we want people to contribute and participate in a specific challenge or whatever. And got a definition here. I have all the references in the end of the slide of the presentation. So one definition of what systems leadership is a set of skills and capacities that any individual or organization can use to catalyze, enable, and support the process of systems level change. So there's a framework that I'm going to share with you that says that it combines these three different topics. So collaborative leadership, coalition building, or let's say community building and engagement, and systems insight to mobilize innovation and action across a large decentralized network. So for that to be, for that to go through, for that to thrive, for all these different components to actually come together in a coherent way, it's important for us to start with ourselves, right? It's important for us to not just look at outside and think, oh, I'm going to change the world, but my actions, my behaviors are completely misaligned with what I really want. Yeah, the systems change to be. So it really needs to start with a mirror. And that's why I've always like to reflect on this Michael Jackson song in terms of what can we do differently, so then our behaviors are, let's say, the extension of our values and the fundamentals that we live by. So then all these other components of this framework kind of works more fluidly. So before we continue on that, I'd like to step back a bit and think about why we're talking about systemic leadership, and go back to some of the topics that we've covered in our previous sessions. So why we're talking about systemic leadership is because we are in this complex system, right? And we are facing a lot of complex challenges. And these challenges, as we've talked about, are unpredictable. There's no right answers. There's a lot of unknowns, many competing ideas, many goals from stakeholders. So it's very different of the frameworks or the ideas that we've been used to, right? So this is a new set of ideas that we're starting to understand, and we're starting to grasp slowly as a society. So that comes with, of course, different ways of looking at what's happening, but as you've all said, different ways of being, right? Different ways of acting. That needs to be aligned because we talked about this circularity. So is, of course, in order to tackle some of these complex challenges, we need to understand the challenges that are in front of us, right? Or at least understand the difference to what we're actually used to. So some of the principles of systems change are seeing the whole rather than the parts. We've talked about this before as well. Seeing the patterns rather than the snapshots or the parts alone. We start to see processes, observing key interactions between a system, engaging different perspectives, constantly learning and adapting, and probing assumptions. So those are different ways of understanding these complex challenges and how we could act when confronting with them, rather than there is an end solution. We just need to find the answer to the end solution, and then we can just live our lives happily. We need to constantly learn and adapt and understand what is happening in the world around us, probe our assumptions, maybe model them, see if it turns into reality. If not, then we go back, relearn, and it's complex, as we've talked about. And this is where we're leading more towards when dealing more with these complex challenges. So I always need to put it in. Okay. So in this world of ever-changing patterns and different ways of observing and different ways of understanding what's going on, the systemic leadership comes, and it has a very prominent importance because it gives a sense of ownership. right? When we understand the system around us, when we understand ourselves, we can feel more not necessarily in control, but we understand a bit better, so we can put ourselves in the system in a better, more coherent way, rather than just, if we don't understand anything, then we just go with assumptions that may not be translated in reality. So because of this increased sense of ownership, then we start to engage in different ways of looking at solving problems or tackling these problems. And systemic leadership, because again, we start with ourselves, we understand that we can't really operate in the same way as before, then we look at what's happening differently, and then we look at what the possible outcomes or the possible pathways are in a different way. And of course, it involves trust. It creates more trust around people that are involved in the challenge. So systemic leadership is different kind of leadership that brings a lot more people together, rather than just the command. I know the answer, you go and do it, which is the traditional way of thinking about leadership. We want people's opinions, we want to involve them, and we cannot do that again without reflecting upon us and why we're doing what we're doing and so forth. So this is a bit of the framework that I wanted to share with you, that the whole idea of systemic leadership is really about understanding the system, looking at the system and understanding that comes from a different nature than what we are used to. So he talks about these complex systems inside. Then he brings the community, the coalition building and advocacy tactics. So it's not just about yourself alone, because we've talked about this before. We can't deal with complexity by ourselves, or one organization cannot deal with this complexity. We do need the community. We do need more people involved. And it's essential for that, for us to develop skills that are going to allow more people to be together, to be discussing ideas, rather than just, as you talked about before, blaming each other. Oh, you're the responsible for that, and so forth. And then lastly is the individual, right? Collaborative leadership skills, and starting with that and having that as an important component to then act in the world, to then bring more people together, create that coherent, let's say, that trust. And then we understand the system, get the system inside, go to the community, go to us. There's going to feedback to the external world and so forth, as we've talked before. So as we've covered the system and the community before, I would like to just focus on the individual here, because this is something that we haven't really addressed much before, and I think it's important in this three feature kind of framework. So any comments so far? How do you understand some of these key elements of systemic leadership, and how how that is different from the traditional way that we look and that we observe leadership to be? What is the main difference for you? What strikes you from looking at this graph here and comparing with our traditional sense of leadership is? Anyone?
Yeah, so okay. Thanks, Yasmin.
All right.
You see, I like the way you started the discussion by getting us reflect before you get to this place, to this diagram, going back to the individual, I really want to comment on the individual part. And my comment is coming from the work that I've been trying to do to build this systems leadership. I think where we have to do more work, I feel like all the systems change practitioners, those that are interested in working in the field of systems changes at the level of the individual level, is a lot of work needs to be done there. We just worked on a project where we are trying to bring a civil society. Okay, so we work with 10 civil society organizations in the DRC and South Africa, with the idea of trying to bring them together and together explore the future of civil society in the next 20 to 25 years, looking at the current trends or the conditions that exist right now, which is about like issues around shrinking of civic engagement space, but more importantly, even the funding, shrinking of funding, because funding is essential, especially for organizations that are doing a particular mandate. You can't do your work if you don't have the resources to do the work. And that's where I started to reflect more on systems leadership, reflecting also my work on my work, working with various partners. And when you did that exercise in the beginning, I really liked that, because everything really started at the individual level, where I'm seeing the challenge of doing the work of systems change is there, the blockage that we have when it comes to building the systems leadership, because systems leadership itself as a concept, it's really about, it's about working together or bringing together a network of organizations. And those organizations are made of leaders. These are people who make decisions. So the idea is to bring those organizations together, then they can collaborate between themselves or with other stakeholders, depending on the particular issue or the change that they want to drive. Be it service delivery or influencing particular policy outcome, or anything that they set themselves as mandate to do. We are going back to the example that I was saying of working with 10 different civil societies. These are organizations that are working in the space of civic democratic governance. But again, each one has got different thematics. Often what I'm noticing that is being a challenge is because we don't work all in the same thematic, so everybody tends to focus on their thematics, and that leads people to be working in silos. That's one aspect. On the other hand, the issue of resources that I mentioned, because there is limited resources, people put more emphasis on the survival mode. Therefore, coming together becomes difficult, actually unrealistic. I mean, we can see it even here in the community. When you announce that there is an event or community gathering, you will have 20 people reserving for the event. But when it comes to prioritize for that discussion, it becomes difficult. And we're seeing it also when organizations that are working together for a particular mandate, it gets difficult for them to really come together. The work of systems leadership is about working together, collaborating, and creating a network to drive that particular change. But it becomes difficult if you can't, as an individual, as an organization, or as an individual leader that is that is in a position to make decisions, can't see that. And this is where I feel like the big question to me, I was reflecting to say that we should maybe be thinking about those conditions. What are the conditions for building systems leadership? That's where I feel more work needs to be done, especially around awareness. And that's what I feel like, yeah, we're really remaining behind. We should be putting more, we should be asking more questions about those conditions, what it will take for us to do that systems leadership for systems change. That's where we're remaining behind, and I think awareness raising is essential, and that needs to start from the individual level. And when you say that you want to focus on the individual part, I really like that, because you can be a great leader You can be a great leader in an organization, but if you still fail to understand that the mandate that you have as an organization about addressing a particular issue, that issue is also linked to many other issues. And you as an organization, you don't have the monopoly to say you will address those issues. Therefore, you have to expand your thinking and your understanding to see who else we can bring together to be able to drive that. As long as we get to that point of seeing that, then we can now start talking about those changes. But up until now, I feel like more works need to be done in that space. Yeah.
Very good point. I think, as you said, where are the conditions to enabling more systemic leadership conversations, skills, abilities, right? Well, what do we need to develop or to enhance in order to have this conversation instead of top-down decisions or hierarchical decisions, more of the circular open spaces, right? Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. Linda.
Yeah, totally. I agree with you. There's a lot to unpack. And just like Asen, I totally like the fact that we reflected a little bit in the beginning, and it kind of opened up the thinking around how systems leadership actually applies in the stuff that we do, the work that we do. So Asen spoke about organizations and gave the example of that research that we worked on. But I want to go a little bit lower, at a lower level, to say that at an individual organization, within the individual organization. So Asen is talking about these organizations actually coming together and working together, right? But when you go into the organization as a system, you realize that people are actually working in silos within the organization, right? So no one actually understands that the human resources department is actually sitting there waiting to just issue out pay slips and sick leave and whatever. And then the finance department is just, we want audit, and the finance department, they're like this, they don't care what the context is. They just want their books to balance, that's all. And then there's programs, people also just trying to achieve something, and requesting funds from finance, and finance will tell them that you didn't put in this paper, so I'm not going to give you the money and stuff like that, So at an organizational level, you actually see that there is actually need for systems leadership where you understand the interconnections of the departments that make the organization to be a functional whole, So yeah, we can talk about organizations coming together, right? But then from their own units, we still have that challenge where their departments are working in silos and they are not achieving, they're not seeing the result that they want to see, because people are actually not working together. The human resources department doesn't understand the human part of the resources and they don't really care about the people or how the people are as an individual, how your personal life can actually have an impact on the work that you're doing. All they want is for you to come at work at 8 o'clock and be there and do 1, 2, 3, and we're going to pay you. So you see that kind of linear way of working, and also people working in silos is what we need to start thinking about from like really lower levels, maybe even going down to the family unit. I don't know. Yeah.
Wow, there's a lot there as well. It's different systems, right? Nested systems, let's say, that we can think. So as you're saying, ourselves as an individual, as a complex system, and then we have ourselves within our close family as a complex system. Then we have our community and the neighborhood and the neighbors. And sometimes that is very difficult to deal with already, right? Families are difficult to deal with already. Then you have, as you're saying, Linda, inside organizations, how people interact in that dynamics that makes it complex. And then in a higher level, organizations within organizations in this network of companies. So, and then, yeah, you can go towards the more global economic systems. That is not just organizations, it's organizations with financial markets and so forth. So all these different nested systems are ways of understanding what's going on. And then systemic leadership goes within these nested systems, right, in different ways. So as yourself, you can just think about your daily behaviors. What are you doing? And how you're relating to your peers, right? Then within your family, how is that dynamic actually supporting the family activities or whatever? And then in different levels, we can think about different issues, right? And yeah, and I think in taking a different approach to leadership influences in different ways, but it influences significantly each one of these levels. And it's important to put us all in perspective, what is our level of observation in this compound of systems. But yeah, very, very good, Linda. Braden.
I was just gonna say that one thing I think is really important in the context of systems leadership is it's almost more about what you don't know than what you do know. So like you can have, you know, as much self-awareness as, you know, if you dedicate yourself to understanding your role in all these different interconnected systems. But there's even more that you're not aware of. And that's where, you know, collective intelligence and, you know, collaborative, sense making, like really understanding things from multiple perspectives, will tell you also more about yourself than you thought you already knew. And because of, you know, the expansive nature of things and how many people there are in the world and non-human life forms there are, you're always going to learn more about yourself and the system the more, you know, you connect and give the floor to other people who have their own experience. So it's a collective learning experience, I think systems leadership is.
Yeah, very good. It's showing up in the world differently, right? Based on, not, as you're saying, the unknown, right? We are very afraid of not knowing in the current narrative that we hold. And that frightens people to not have the final saying. So is really about shifting that idea of no, it's not just about what I know, it's about what we can create together. And how can we facilitate a space where people feel comfortable and trusting in the space to contribute and to be wrong and make mistakes and maybe, you know, just see that if something else comes out of that unknown space. So it's really a lot more exploratory than certain. And that's amazing, right? That's a shift that is very much needed in a space of complex issues. You want to share your comment, Arsene?
Not really. I was just agreeing with what Bryden was speaking about. Sometimes we don't know even the things that we hold. Like we don't know ourselves, you know. Like, and I was reflecting on the workshop when we discussed last workshop we had, when we were saying that this work, even when it comes to systems leadership, it's same as when you do strategic foresight for organization. So before you get to make decisions that will influence the future of your organization, of the particular work that you do, you need to get to discover your biases, because they do influence a lot. They influence how you think, they influence how you make decisions, and the decisions that you make also, they have implication on the outcomes that you get. So I was just agreeing with her on that.
Nice, very good. And yeah, I think that leads us to some of the final comments of the slides, and then we can go to general questions. So one definition of this collaborative leadership is really, as you've talked about, right? Maintaining a process that includes everyone involved in an issue or organization, a process that depends on collaborative problem solving and decision making. So stepping away from this, I'm right, you're wrong approach, now you go and do what I've told, and more. Let's all be in this space and share ideas and support each other. And the individual part of it is really about being in a space like that, in a way that facilitates the emergence of, as you're saying, collective intelligence, bringing up unknowns, maybe something that you don't know, someone else might have a say on that, and that can influences problem solving, that can influence in decision making. So all that is part of this process. And some of the skills that are involved in being that systemic leader, let's say, is respecting and dealing with diversity with ease, because we all come from different backgrounds, we all have different perspectives, as you've mentioned, we all have our different biases, right? And respecting that and dealing with these situations rather than just automatically putting a tag to it saying, no, you're wrong, let's just focus on something else, right? Then catalyzing conversations, being that person that ignites conversations rather than that blocks conversations and discussions. Facilitating spaces, it's not just about what I know, as you've talked before, it's about what we know together and what we don't know together, right? And focusing on what is best for the group, which, as you've mentioned before, some of the biases that we have may lead us to just sway to spaces where it's comfortable and known. But here we are stewarding, if you will, for the goal that we want to achieve, not one or the other specifically, but what is the overall why that we are here for, collective and together. So keeping a track on that rather than our personal gains is crucial. So yeah, I think you've talked about all of that before. And I wanted to put some questions here in the room, and you can address the ones that you would like. But here we have some further thoughts. Is systemic leadership always the right solution or the most adequate solution? What could be the disadvantage of applying systemic leadership or creating skills or developing the skills and abilities of systemic leadership? Can you think of examples of how this skill could be applied or useful? Is it possible to practice collaborative and systemic leadership? So some questions that I'll leave you to think about. And if you'd like to address any of those, like how useful is what we've just talked about in your work or in a project that you're more related to this type of leadership rather than a more traditional one? Questions that I'll leave you to it now. Linda.
Yeah, thanks, Yasmin. I'm just gonna pick on the last one about it being possible to practice collaborative or systems leadership. And I think, yeah, my answer would be yes, it is possible. Asen mentioned earlier on about a report that we are working on, a research report, and we're looking at other, like best practices, people that have done similar stuff across the world. And there are very good examples out there of organizations that have been applying collaborative leadership. Yeah, and I think it is possible. So basically, an example is an organization that is working across, like they are collaborating across different sectors. So understanding the interconnectedness of the issues, and then instead of working in silos to address those issues, they are coming together and actually working towards like a holistic kind of way to address those challenges. So yeah, I feel that it is possible.
Good, yeah. And you just mentioned, I think, 2 examples there, right, of that being done in practice. So you don't need to just born like that, right? You can always develop these skills, which is very, very good. Awesome. Braden.
I was gonna build on what Linda was saying. Like it's definitely possible to demonstrate and demonstrate systems leadership and really work in and learn with others about the context and sort of operate accordingly. I would say it's possible, but it's difficult, given the incentive structure that we are currently living in, because there are more disincentives to systems leadership than there are, incentives, where like there are lots of communities, coming together and learning about systems and all the different systems they're a part of, and learning about who they themselves are as people in relation to the system. But a lot of that value is not appreciated by the traditional market, which leaves a lot of people, struggling to balance things that can actually generate value other than financial value. And conflicting with their needs to put food on the table and take care of their families and things like that. So it's definitely possible. It's like, but it's also an uphill battle, I think, in the current context. But I'm sure, as we were talking about earlier, as more and more people are able to demonstrate that it's possible, it'll make it easier for people to practice it in the future.
Awesome. I think Arsene wants to build up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to agree with both Raiden and Linda. I think it's possible. It's possible to do it, especially if we're doing it from a space where people or organizations are really independent. Right now, talking from my experience and working in this space, there's a lot of competing interest, and that can make systems leader or collaborative leadership very challenging. We see it especially in the NGO space. You will see 3 organizations or 3 or 4 organizations that are working in the field of HIV to address or to improve HIV outcomes, but they see themselves as competitors because they have to be finding who's got a good model to or good project to secure funding. That's where it becomes quite challenging. But we do have cases where, especially if it's built at the community level, like both grassroots level, where there's no interest, competing interest, it does work, it's possible. And that's why I was talking about independence and people really going back to agree with what Braden was talking about, the values, like recognizing understanding and recognizing the values that each one carries. If people are working from that space of being themselves, independent, and looking at what really drive them internally, I mean, from the grassroots level, we've seen those models operating. And this is without expertise, by the way. We've seen communities that dealt with issue of drought just by mobilizing as communities, looking at leaders at the community and creating local committees within the community to come up with models that mobilize people to address a particular issue that affect their communities without competing interest. It does work in. So that's why I'll go back to comment again on awareness. I think awareness is good. It's essential in this case. If we have to promote that systems leadership. We have to really do a lot of work in raising awareness.
Yes, for sure. And yeah, I think the topic that you're putting there is extremely important. The incentives, and not just financial incentives, right? But we have the status of who's gonna be right in the end of the day, and that brings a lot of social acceptance, which leads to, I don't know, in the world of today, more recognition, more invitation to talks here and there, and feeds back to the projects that are being created by the organization and so forth. So it's not just a small issue. The incentives are extremely powerful. And what can we do to deal with these incentives? I'll leave you with this topic. That can be the theme of our community gathering for 2025, because next month we already have a topic to discuss, and that's going to be about transformational regenerative systems, which I will leave the link here in the chat. And yeah, there's going to be the last of our community gatherings of this year, and then we can come back fresh 2025 with more energy, more passion. Is that anyway? So yeah, that was it, everyone. A quick introduction to the systemic leadership topic, and hope you enjoyed it. Hope that was insightful. And yeah, see you end of November, more specifically the 26th, so we can talk about transformation and regenerative systems. All right.
Thank you, Yasmin.
Thank you so much,
Thanks,
Yasmin.
Kathleen.
Thank you, Braden.
Have a
Thank you,
good day,
Fu.
everyone.
Thank you, Linda.
Lovely to
You
see
too.
you.
Nice
Bye.
to see you.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.
Bye, Fru.